The Duke Ellington Center for the Arts, in association with the American Tap Dance Foundation, proudly presenting a spectacular evening celebrating the life and music of jazz legend Duke Ellington. And it's Friday, December 12th at 7 p.m. at Symphony Space, the Peter J. Sharp Theater. The evening is directed by Mercedes Ellington and Tony Vogt. And joining me now is the incredible Mercedes Ellington. Great to see you.
Great to see you too. Great to be seen.
What a wonderful event this is going to be. The music dual director will be Eli Yeaman and the
Yeah.
Duke Ellington Center Big Band. Why at this point did you want to have this special celebration for your grandfather?
Well, first of all, he liked celebrations. Any excuse, any reason to do an album, which is what he did, because anytime any country had asked him to appear, he would then thank them by writing an album. And I think that the album that we're celebrating is at this time, you would think maybe it should be a Christmas album or something like that, but we chose to do an album from his visit to England. And that is when people think of England and Shakespeare and literature, Shakespeare comes to mind. Now, I think that my grandfather had a lot in common with Shakespeare, and they liked to cover the same things, the same subject matter, history, and the comedy and tragedy, and of course, uh, Shakespeare also did the sonnets, and his, and I think that my grandfather, well, first of all, he was his motto was beyond category, so he didn't like to be hemmed down by any situations or any rules and regulations as far as music is concerned, because he liked to, fool around with different types of structures of music and subject matter of music. And so then here we have the Shakespearean suite, which he's dealing now with these characters that Shakespeare wrote about, and he's putting them into a jazz music background.
Such sweet thunder is rarely heard
Yes.
complete performance, so this is really a special night.
Yeah, and for some reason, there's a lot of Shakespeare going around at this time, in Broadway musicals and in recordings and concerts and things. And so, I mean, I don't think we were actually affected by that, but it happened that we were planning on doing some concerts that reflected the Ellington catalog. So we had done the Ellington Strayhorn Nutcracker, and we have all these other things in mind. There's Drum as a Woman. There's lots of other subjects. Of course, the ones that um, are thankful and are we means of his to thank the countries. For instance, when we went to Russia, um, I went with him. I was doing No No Nanette on Broadway, and I managed to wrangle 2 weeks worth of a vacation to go with them on their 5 week tour. And they were following, actually, they were invited as a State Department tour, and we were following Alvin Ailey. He had been invited. So then we were the next Americans to come to Russia. And in his plans, which were completely ignored, he wanted to try to find the original score of Tchaikovsky's Nutcracker so that he could complete the first act, because he and Billy only did the second act. So he wanted to, that he never did, because they kept us so busy by traveling and all of the activities that we were doing. And the Russian people were so giving and so knowledgeable of the catalog. We said, okay, this is a remote country that had never really been that tied to Americana, and but they were in the music. So it proves that, to me, that music can conquer anything, everything.
I'm curious. There's going to be so many great dancers and performers and singers connected with this. At what point did Mercedes tell Father Mercer and Grandfather Duke, I want to be a dancer?
Well, as it turns out, she did not have anything to do with the profession that she ended up in. But the doctors said that I had poor circulation, and being that I was raised by my mother's mother, he suggested to her that she keep me moving. And so she did. I was always in kindergarten. I was in kindergarten when I was 18 months old, and they had a movement uh, section of their um, in in their offering. So I was immediately in that vein. I remember even the shoes that I was wearing. And we did a version. I was a snowflake. One of the roles that I was a snowflake in the Nutcracker. And it was amazing because I was really fascinated with the movement, with the dancers, with the costumes, and also with the music. And that was my first introduction. And after that, I just kept on enrolling as I could, because in those days, there were restrictions color wise and everything as to where you could study, who you could study with. And uh, it was an amazing transition from one thing to the other, from grade school, the gymnastic, physical therapy that was attached to the curriculum resulted in a woman named Madame Povich, who came every Tuesday to teach ballet. And I remember my grandmother I was annoyed because I wanted more than just the Tuesday. And I asked if I could go to her school, which she had a school downtown, Madame Povich's regular ballet school. And I was told every year my grandmother asked if I could be enrolled in the school, and they just kept saying the registration is full. The registration is full. So my grandmother was a very politically minded person, and my grandmother was from Kingston, Jamaica, and she turns out when one of my sisters did Ancestry.com, that she was an orphan, but she was Ashkenazi. And she was very determined in her endeavors. She worked at the voting polls and everything. So she was politically minded. And she got tired of being told that the registry was full. So she took me by the hand to the Reverend Mother of the grammar school. And she said, why is this always the answer when no matter how early we come, the registry is full? As it turns out, she didn't really want people of color in the school downtown. So, in order to placate my grandmother, she told her that I could have a starring role in the St. Patrick's Night festivities, and I would be having a solo, which was my first introduction to Irish jigs and reels, which led me eventually to tap dancing. And so that was also she told me that I could be the head angel in the Christmas pageant. So those were the rewards that I got for not having been able to be accepted in the ballet school downtown.
Do you think because of the blood inside you being a trailblazer like your grandfather, Duke, was, and that was already kind of a part of you too, to be a trailblazer?
Well, I think I must have inherited I don't know what the name you would call it, but the chutzpah that my grandmother exhibited, and go where no man goes before. I wasn't afraid. I made me a little nervous, but I had friends who were always there to support me, people my age, because they knew nothing about this ridiculous, exceptional rules and regulations, unspoken rules and regulations. And so my equals, they always made me comfortable in the situation. And it went on to through high school. I got a scholarship at the Metropolitan Opera School of Ballet, which was the old Met. They had a school, a ballet school, and I was accepted there. And from there, that gave me a segue into Juilliard, because there were the same teachers from that school into Juilliard. And Juilliard, it just follows you all around, all these connections. And from the Juilliard connection, when I graduated, um, I was like really foundering around. Now what I said, now what do I do? Then I said, okay, the ballet world is not willing to accept me, so maybe the Broadway world will. And I was looking to be parts of Broadway shows and stuff. And it was at that time, there were a group of us who were all women of color, and we would go to audition for these Broadway shows. And we knew that there was a chance, a big chance, that we would not be accepted because of our color. So we had sort of a club, and we went just to meet and greet with each other. And we said, okay, we'll learn the combination. And the combination, we took it as a free jazz class. So every time we'd go to the audience, and we knew ahead of time that there was a great possibility that we weren't, but it would give us a chance to meet and greet with each other. We'd have coffee afterwards. And so it was, an accepted situation. Even when, I guess it was No Strings, and Diane Carroll was one of the stars. And we said, well, if Diane Carroll is one of the stars, maybe they'll accept some of us as a chorus member or chorus members. But it wasn't happening. And they blamed it on Diane Carroll because they said that she didn't want any distractions. But it was just, it's, when you look back at it, it's such a ridiculous situation. um when I the biggest thing and the biggest change in my life is when I became a June Taylor dancer. Now, I don't know if you remember, you may be too young,
I know
Joan,
about the June Taylor dancers. I do know that.
but do you know about Jones Beach Marine Theater with Guy Lombardo?
I know Guy Lombardo, but I don't know much about about the theater.
Okay. Guy Lombardo had a float with his band on it at the Jones Beach Marine Theater. And during the summer, they would put on big, gigantic shows with big casts, singers and dancers. Nowadays, the singers are dancers and vice versa, but they had separate singers, chorus of singers, chorus of dancers. And that's the first time that I had worked for June Taylor. And segue from that, there came a time when one of the dancers called me up and said, are you going to audition for the Jackie Gleason show for the June Taylor dancers? And I said, but they are not accepting people of color. I don't think that it's wise for me. And she said, well, it might change, but come over to my house. We'll go on the roof. I'll teach you the combination. I know the tap combination. So I did, and I went, it was like August, on a rooftop, tar rooftop, learning a tap dance combination. So I went, and I used to go, that was the start of my going every year to audition for the June Taylor dancers. And this one year I went, and they were auditioning at this hotel, the rooftop area of the hotel. And I said, well, I'm in the mood. I'll just learn the combinations. And they had ballet combination, jazz combination, tap combination. And then, you were set up in a lineup, and they eliminated you along the way as to who was the best. And I remember the year that I got to be a June Taylor dancer was the year that Kennedy was assassinated.
Mm.
And so I went up, and it was a very exhausting situation, because if you can imagine starting out at 10 o'clock in the morning and maybe I think maybe 4 or 5 in the afternoon was the finish.
Wow.
So at the end of this particular time, I we were all in a lineup, and I was counting because along the way they would eliminate June would eliminate maybe 2 or 3 people, and I noticed in the lineup that there were only 17. And I said, well, I guess I should get ready to leave because I was looking around, trying to remember where I left my coat. And I said, well, I'll just go and get my coat and go because I was I was scheduled. I knew that there was a tap class that I wanted to take after this audition. So when push came to shove, Gleason walked in the room, Jack Philbin walked in the room, and they started whispering with June. And all of a sudden, June turned to us and she said, ladies, you are the new June Taylor dancers. And I thought she forgot about me, that I should go, you know? And so she said, no, that you are the actual June Taylor dancers. And then she came to me and she took me aside and she said, now there's going to be a lot of news about this because of you. And I just want you to know that if you don't live up to the situation, and if you make too many mistakes or whatever, I am going to fire you. Because she was known for firing girls every week. If they
Oh.
did, if they had holes in their tights, if they didn't wear makeup, they had to wear makeup to rehearsals. And if their hair wasn't done, and if they gained too much weight. And it's so ironic because I ended up being the keeper of the sale of the scales, because she would have me when I ended up, being chosen as a June Taylor dancer. Um, I was there for 7 seasons, which one season is half a year.
Oh.
And that first season was in New York. And then Gleason decided to move down to Miami Beach. And that was a trip too, the train down there. But it was an amazing journey because um, she was meticulous about the way you looked in your hair, makeup, your tights, your just general. Because in any moment, Gleason could walk into the rehearsal room, and she didn't want him thinking that she had hired a bunch of dogs, you know. So it was just on your toes every second of every day. And I was recently invited to a reunion of the Rockettes of Color, and I was looking at all of the girls there at the party, and I was wondering, they looked so familiar. It wasn't that I knew them, but I knew the body language. I knew the way they talked, and it was like such a throwback into memory lane, because when you are trained as a precision dancer, it's like being trained for the army. It's like a soldier, and you begin to behave naturally the way you are taught to carry yourself on stage. So it was a trip, really. But
Mm.
I know a few. I still keep in touch with a lot of the dancers, and we sometimes get together and talk about old times, But I just remember June, and her concern for me and my welfare, especially when we got to Florida, because an incident happened on the train when we from the old beautiful Penn Station that they tore down. We took the train because Gleason didn't like to fly, so we were on the Great Gleason Express.
Wow.
Uh, I think Jilly catered the train. Steve Lawrence and a Dixieland band played on the train, and it was a real party, going down there until we got to the South. And I don't know what state it was, but they wanted us to come out on the platform for publicity and taking pictures and interviews and things. And I didn't want to get out because I said, okay, I know a lot of New Yorkers go to Florida and a lot of New Yorkers are in Miami Beach, but in the South, I just don't want to be around. And I could just see, you know, strange fruit hanging from the trees. So I said, but they didn't have a lot of dancers who made that transition from New York to Miami Beach. So I went out on the platform, lurking in the back near an exit so that if anything happened, I could get back in the train. So I've got big sunglasses, hat, everything. And still, somebody from the back of the crowd yells out, "What's that colored girl doing up there?" And that was giving me the shivers right there. I tell you, I was getting ready to go right back into the train. And Gleason reached out and pulled me under his armpit. And he said, "You stay right here." And I think he never really thought that that would happen. I don't think he was aware that that was a possibility of me being pointed out, you know. And but from then on, I think he made sure that I was okay, especially when we got to Miami Beach. But there was no problem because there were so many New Yorkers in Miami Beach. I never really ran into that kind of a situation again.
I'm so glad to hear that about Jackie Gleason.
Yeah,
I wanted to ask you, you brought up Alvin Ailey. The Alvin Ailey American Dance Theater almost yearly dances to a Duke Ellington song.
yes.
And you talked about, the fact with this event coming up. What do you think is it about dance and Duke Ellington and jazz? It's a perfect match.
Yes. Well, have you heard of a man named Ornette Coleman?
Absolutely.
Do you know about his theory? When you put a bowl of water on a table and you have a live musician playing near that section of the room, the water moves. And so the Louis Armstrong Music and Medicine Foundation created the situation where musicians go to hospitals to play for patients to increase their circulation and thus their healing. They also do that with um, patients who have problems with their throats, asthma patients, and patients who are with their breathing and just general circulation. And it has been proven that not only does the music have an effect on your physical body, but your mental acuity as well. And so I think that following that belief and following that premise, it's really logical to to see how that can happen and how it's really crucial for people to be exposed to the music. Now, my grandfather did a lot of, as I said, his catalog is almost approaches that of Papa Haydn. And he he didn't want to be hemmed in by any particular subject matter. So he foundered all over. His association with Alvin was that they my he what was it? The river. That was the river was especially composed for Alvin. But as it turns out, the American Ballet Theater also had it in their repertoire. So the choreography was a little changed, but the music was the same. The premise was the same, and he wanted to really crack this theory of his that music can take you beyond categories. So it's the way it's interpreted, it's the people who partake in the music, and it's just something that can be used and as I don't know. People are talking about AI now. Well, music is probably AI.
Mhm. What else would you like to tell us about such sweet thunder and this event coming up on the 12th?
Well, Such Sweet Thunder is highlighting not only certain musicians in each section. There are 12 sections. And if you look at the liner notes of the original album, it tells you who is uh, the person who is associated with the piece. and the person takes on a persona of a Shakespearean character. So I think, maybe my grandfather had a dream or something, and Shakespeare came to him in this dream. So he associated, like Johnny Hodges is one of the characters, and Cat Anderson is one of the characters. So we're going to be doing the same thing by highlighting some of the musicians that are in the orchestra. We have 15 pieces, and we're also going to introduce different factions of other entertainment. We're using ballroom dancers. We're using tap dancers. We're using a stilt walker. We're using two vocalists. And even though the Shakespearean suite has no lyrics to any of the pieces, we're creating scatting and some improvisational vocal things. I say things because it's just an attitude that you have in a reaction to hearing what happens to you when you listen to music. Tom Hanks was on recently, Stephen Colbert, and he made up a thing, and it was a scat. I mean, it's combination of scat and improvisational rhyming thing that he just made up to describe something that he was doing, and it made sense because but it created like a rhythm, to it, and it got people going. And so it's something that we can all do together. It's a unifying process. It's something that is in us in the first place. I know there are some people who have a hard time staying on a note, or some people have a hard time with rhythm, but it's used to they find out there are medical reasons for these things, and music is absolutely used for healing purposes. So I'm hoping that people get exposed to this and have a little bit more respect for the musical industry, and to realize that the composers, whether they're classical composers, jazz composers, and players, that this music is a great has a great deal of information for all of us. And we can use it. It's available wherever you go, and you see. And some people have a preference for classical or jazz or whatever. And some people invent new kinds of approaches to music. But whatever it is, it's worth your in going to see. It's worth investigating. And I feel, make up your own mind, of course, but still, it's going to be interesting.
Yeah,
And especially in these days.
absolutely. The legacy of the Ellington family continues on. I'm curious and would love to know. Your father, Mercer, of course, took over the band,
Yes.
and can you take us into a conversation that you had with your dad and your grandfather that maybe we could learn something from?
Well, both of them were my grandfather and my father were sometimes at odds with each other. My father, when he was playing with the Duke Ellington Orchestra, was fourth trumpet, flugelhorn, and he was in charge of keeping the guys in the band together. That was a terrible uh, job, because there were some guys who, Cat Anderson, and I could name a couple of other people. Uh, Hodges, not Hodges wasn't, his nickname was the Rabbit. Hodges wasn't that bad, but um, uh, we had, God, the trumpet section was a great deal, because they told me, my father told me, that there was a consistent dis, description of the feelings of and the output of the musicians, because of the instruments that they chose to play. The saxophones, he started with the saxophones, and he told me that the saxophones uh, are usually not very bright because that is the easiest instrument to play unless they play another or other reed instruments. Then that meant that they were, a little bit more um, able to do lots of things. The trombones were usually very slippery, so you had to watch out what you did, what you said to them, and watch out what they said to you. And the trumpet players at the top of the tier, if they're displayed that way, are usually like opera divas because they are at the top of the tier and because of the sound that they produce and the way they have to stand when they produce that sound. And he shifted over to the the percussionists, the drummers. They're usually fine after their first nervous breakdown. He shifted to the bass players and he described them as being the salt of the earth. He never did say anything about the piano. So I'm assuming that he just wanted to lay off.
Mm. So as this performance is going on, what will you be thinking about?
I'll be thinking about what they would think of this performance and that I would be fulfilling their, I guess, their hopes because, um, as I said, my grandmother, my mother's mother, raised me. So I really had little times with my father and my father's side of the family. I would go to see them at the Apollo. My grandmother would take me there, and the the orchestra members' wives would sit with me. And at that time, we would see it would be a movie and a show and a movie and a show, and I was in heaven. And then we'd go backstage, and the orchestra members' wives they would bring fried chicken, and I was in heaven. And then after the show, the last show, we go down to this wonderful restaurant that had tablecloths on 125th Street, and we'd have more fried chicken and food, and I was in heaven. And so I just associated good times and meetings with all of these guys, and the when they heard that I was dancing, they used to call me the dancer. And I remember being with Billy Strayhorn when I was really, really little. I thought he was another child. So I used to hang out with him because he was my height. And I would like to sit with him whenever we were sitting together. Well, he was great. He was unbelievable, and he was very courteous to me. And he was because at that time it was there were no other children around, but I was also very quiet, and I wasn't a problem for them to drag me around. But when we went to Russia, that was really the most incredible situation. We Nobody knows about this exchange, but my grandfather used to have a glass of Coca-Cola on the piano during the set, and he'd take sips of from it, and he'd put sugar in it. And so one of the promoters here in New York, Phoebe Jacobs, she wanted to make sure that he had enough Coca-Cola for Russia. So she calls up Coca-Cola, and they never answered her. So she then thought about Joan Crawford, who was married to Pepsi Cola. So she called up Joan Crawford, who was a big fan of Duke Ellington's. And Joan Crawford sent over Pepsi Cola with the instructions, just don't let him see the can. So he had all of this. And in turn, Pepsi Cola caught the contract for Stolichnaya. So they brought Stolichnaya back to America. So Stolichnaya became the first Russian vodka in America, and Pepsi Cola became the first American soft drink in Russia because of that trip.
That's a great story.
It's ridiculous,
It's a great one. The Duke Ellington Center for the Arts in association with the American Tap Dance Foundation is presenting this wonderful evening on Friday, December 12th at Symphony Space's Peter J. Sharp Theater. And it's an evening that is directed by my guests today, Mercedes Ellington and Tony Vogt. It's been an honor to talk to you, Mercedes. Continued success and keep the legacy going.
Okay, and hello to Isaiah, wherever you are.